it is said that data is the foundation on which AI sits. So the plan for these events was very simple. We opened the floor to all attendees to discuss the challenges and the solutions to managing and utilizing data and AI to improve business functions. So now that we've had a bit of time to fully process those responses, we decided that we get together again to host today's webinar. And what we're going to do is take a look at some of the more interesting insights that we gathered from the events, and we're going to share them with you today. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our two guests. We have John Clancy, the CEO of Galvia AI, and Fergal O'Connor, the CEO of Bymedia. AIB Merchant Services, Galvia AI, and Bymedia work really well, are three companies that work really well together. ABMS provide multiple sources of data to our merchants. Galvia AI specialise in uniting that data to give it more meaning. And Bymedia tell you how to turn data into sales through AI-powered advertising. So with that, thank you both very much for helping us with today's webinar.
No problem. Thank you, Connor.
So what I want to start with is setting the scene for AI in retail as it sits currently. So what we'll do is talk about some of the products that the retailers at those events were using. So products that are currently being used by Irish retailers. I'll start with you, John. Were there any that you remember, any particular products used by the retailers?
Yeah, there was one in particular, that planogram one we spoke about earlier, but it wasn't able to get a smartphone to take a video of your store, but beyond that, beyond product placement in the actual store, it was connected to an intelligence behind it that would give you the why. Why is this store doing better than another retail store? Not just based on the product placement, but a little bit more deeper. Okay. I found that very interesting.
What about you, Fergal?
Yeah, what I thought was really interesting was the varying levels of adoption, Connor. You know, there was businesses who seemed to have really jumped into it. You know, there was businesses there that were using a lot of AI tools and using a lot of data as best they could in possibly silos that they already had. Some of them were really big into it, and then some of them were like, oh no, we haven't done anything yet. Like, we haven't even started thinking about it yet because it's too scary, too risky, too unknown, and we don't want to like risk anything in our business by jumping into it. So we'll see how it goes, kind of approach. But there was one that I thought was very interesting. Obviously, we're advertising and marketing is our background, and our technology is all about that. And one that I thought was very interesting from one of the retailers was an AI visualization tool that they were using to look at customer demographics as they were entering the store, and they were linked into screens that were actually dotted around the stores that were serving out offers based on the different demographics, whether it was gender or age. Obviously, images were all anonymized, but they could make out from the images whether it was male, female, what sort of age group they fitted into, and therefore they were able to serve out, if they had a promotion for a particular demographic, they were able to serve that out on the screen in the store to say special offer on this particular product that might suit your demographic in that kind of format.
Really cool product.
What I thought was really interesting about that was, though, that they were looking at it from a one tool. You know, they weren't looking at it from a strategy perspective. So the difficulty they had then was, so I asked the question, you know, well, have you linked that to say your brand advertising, or have you linked that to your online e-commerce? They hadn't done that bit of it, but they were using this tool, which is cool, in store, but there was actually probably more opportunity there that they hadn't actually activated yet.
Okay. Yeah. John, to your point about the planogram, I thought that was a really interesting product. The retailer was talking about how he would upload a picture of his shelves, and the AI tool would kind of suggest where best to place certain products and so on. I wanted to know, were there any products aside from the event that you're aware of being used by Irish retailers now? Any AI products that are particularly interesting?
Well, there's a very interesting one that Amazon are currently doing regarding on their distribution, and to get the product from the warehouse to their customer as efficiently as possible. And they've built a machine learning model that is knocking 30 minutes a day off their distribution times. And if you look at that approach, and it goes to what Fergal was talking about, they're not doing this in isolation. You know, they're doing this as a strategic approach to bringing AI across their business. You know, 400,000 of a team delivering products by half an hour a day. It's 1.5 billion a year. So they all add up. You know, I thought that was pretty cool.
So what we're going to do now is pop up our first survey. We've got 3 surveys, and we're going to go through the responses or the survey results at the end of the webinar. But hopefully we're going to be able to just pop up the first one now, which is asking which of the following AI tools have you used. So it'll be interesting to see if, you know, our viewers are using the same tools that the retailers at the events were using. Okay, and where we're going to go to next is to a kind of a broader background on AI. So to look to the future, it's obviously very important that you understand the past. And as far as I'm aware, I wouldn't have been having conversations about AI before ChatGPT was released in 2023. But both of your companies were providing AI, you know, tech long before then. So John, could you kind of set the scene for AI, a bit of background on the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, in the terms of AI and the world of AI, we're around nearly 8 years. You know, it's a lifetime. It's probably 3 lifetimes in the world of AI. But it's always been in the back end. You know, but in the last, we'd say, we started out doing automating workflows for HR for some very large consumer packaged goods companies. Lots of people, lots of boring processes, and streamline it with NLP and conversational AI techniques. But especially in the last 2 years with the advent of ChatGPT and generative AI, they've put a front end on it. So people can actually now interact with, you don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be an engineer. Anybody now can interact with a model by simply asking it questions.
Is that the main distinction? Is that between the AI tech that you would have been using 8 years ago and ChatGPT, that anyone can use ChatGPT?
Yeah, and and the way I like to explain it is like to try and take it back, and it's a thing labeler. That's what this is. And before, you had to code and tell an application as a software engineer, this is what I want to do. Instead of doing that, you're just showing it different, and you're labeling success, failure, black, white, so it begins to understand. So you're doing by showing, not doing by coding. And that's been the massive, massive shift, I would say, in the past, especially the past 2 years.
Okay. And how's the landscape changed for you when you set up your company versus now in terms of AI?
I would say massively, and in the last 2 years in particular. And now that everybody's talking about it, I think it's actually better that it's front and center, because all the proper questions people are now asking around, you know, governance, around how do I structure it. Everyone understands that their data is the most important thing they own. You know, they're not going to license it out at a wide level. But like the distinctions between them, if you'd like me to jump into that, is you know, you have generative AI it's an approach in AI that's able to create new content from an input. And these inputs are called prompts that everybody's quite familiar with ChatGPT as an example. Now there are loads of them. There are hundreds of large language models across the world. But a large language model is that they've consumed at a general level everything. They've consumed YouTube, they have Facebook, all the Meta products, all the internet, and like at an immense level. So it's very good at general understanding. It will create something new. It'll create something novel. But its job is to pattern match what you put in. So it's trying to give you the answer it thinks you want.
Okay.
So its job is to find you the most plausible creative or the most plausible fake answer.
Yeah.
Machine learning's job is to find you the right answer. And that is the difference. At a business level, that is the difference.
Okay.
One is very good at querying data, summarizing data, locating information, and creating documents, which is generative. And then the other side is machine learning. It's more ones and zeros.
Okay. And as I said in the intro, kind of both heavily rely on data. So would you agree with that, Fergal? Or both systems? Is data the foundation of any good AI tool?
Absolutely. And it's a bit like if you have a supercar sitting in your driveway, but there's no fuel to run it. All you're doing is looking at a pretty car. But the fuel is the data. And if you have the data, first of all, the data has to be structured in the right way. The data has to be organized in a correct format that the AI can understand. It has to be in such a way that you almost start with the problem first. So the problem is I want to solve, I want to figure out, in our instance, is we have a customer and we want to figure out what media they consume. And when we figure out what media they consume, then we need to figure out what's the best advertising to buy for that media. Okay. Then we need to figure out whether that media campaign has worked or hasn't worked, and that creates a feedback loop back into the start again. So it's creating that data kind of stream for businesses, and I just gave the advertising example, but that can be across production, it can be across HR, it can be across inventory, but you need the data going in at the start in a way, in a format, in a structured way that the AI can actually understand it. Okay. And you need to know what the outcome needs to be.
Okay, because at our events, that was one of the first questions we asked the attendees. What are the challenges you face to managing and utilising the data you have available to you? So John, was there a particular challenge that stood out to you, that stood out in your memory?
Yeah, it's the same challenge, whether you're a small business, whether you're a large business, medium-sized business, is that you will have typically grown if you're successful, and you will have several or maybe tens or hundreds of systems that underpin your business. And each one of them may have AI independently sitting within each one, but to connect those up and to get that siloed pieces of data in a shape that that AI or machine learning in particular can understand is the biggest challenge for all business, regardless of size.
What did you take away from it, Fergal? Any challenges that stood out?
I think to follow on John's point, it just seemed to be that there wasn't a challenge with the data. So the data was sitting there, like it's in the business. Yeah. So like there's all these different systems within the organization that's created lots and lots of data for the businesses, but they just didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. You know, so it's sitting there and they're looking at it and going, God, we got loads of data, isn't this great? But what actually can we use it for? So I suppose to bring it from John's perspective, where they'd kind of organize and structure the data and to try and solve some sort of problem, it's back to figuring out what the problem is. So in our instance, again, it's back to kind of like, we want to make our marketing more effective. So that's the problem that they're trying to solve. Yeah. And then how can we use these different silos of data to actually connect those things up to figure out who the customer is, what the media consumption is, what the right channels are to execute that campaign, how do we learn from that, how do we make recommendations then into the future once we have enough data. Yeah. So it's all back to kind of, again, it's thinking of the problem and then can AI solve that problem rather than thinking here's AI as the solution to everything and trying to put that square peg into sometimes a round hole. You have to figure out what the problem is first, and then AI can probably give you a solution.
Yeah. Okay. Another challenge that was discussed commonly was the balance between using data and your judgment or your intuition when making decisions. I thought that was a really interesting one as well. But what we're going to do now is put up a little poll on challenges. So we're going to be able to see if our viewers at the moment kind of have the same challenges when it comes to managing their data and using it. So the poll might pop up there. So which of the following data challenges do you most identify with? So the viewers can read the various options. So what I want to move on to now is the solutions. So how to get meaning from your data. So John, you talked about that, the retailers at the event have numerous sources of data and they're kind of sitting in silos. So how do you overcome that problem?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge for most of our clients, and that's, I suppose, the reason why we exist, is that the AI, any type of AI adoption is a journey, and it's a new technology, it's change. So you need a strategy and a plan before you just jump in and go with ChatGPT or go. You need to take a step back and see, where am I going to go with this? Where am I going to start? And typically our clients like to start with, naturally, how is this going to give me deeper insights that I didn't have before and deeper predictions to drive my revenue line? By connecting it up. And we typically connect it up. How we do that is that we put it into one place, and that's typically a knowledge graph, which is a live representation of all of your data. And then you need a continuous pipe, if you think of it like a pipe, because data grows every single day. So once you have it cleaned, once you have it curated, once you have it in a shape that, and in a knowledge graph, typically for our clients, that you have a pipeline of continuous deployment and a pipeline of continuous data. So the models that you're creating for your client are created on their data. There's no call outs to, and that's a lot of people's big, because I could see it there on some of the polls. they're adopting ChatGPT, but it's a general technology. The power of large language models and using that, but within a closed instance in your business. Use it to query your data, search your data. It's really, really good at doing that outside of, we're not giving your data away. Because I think everybody knows now your data is one of the most important assets you have in your business.
So something you said earlier was quite interesting, that you could have an AI-powered tool within one source of data. But what you're saying is that this is having an AI-powered tool when all the data is collated together.
Yes. And giving that power then to your team. So if you have, I would say, one of our clients has a number of stores across the country. So every morning they have a one view of, tell me what's happening. The senior management can see everything in the business.
Yeah, they're not logging onto multiple systems.
And at a store level, they can see, what did I do this time last year? What did I do, what am I planning to do today? As the model starts to grow with you, it'll start prompting your team to say, it's not going to tell them what to do. You give them ideas. Why don't you bundle this with this or try this? And then it becomes like a data-driven, like an aid, a help, not something that people are, it's coming to take my job, because it's not going to do that. It's the back end. It's really good at the boring side of your business, but the boring side of your business is typically the nuts and bolts of your business, where you're going to save money or drive revenue. And that's what it's really good at.
Okay. So Fergal, you said that one of the challenges that stood out to you was not knowing what to do with your data. How do you overcome that problem?
Well, I suppose it's to look again at the business, both from, as John mentioned, the high-level strategic element of the business, but then also look at, are there like chunks that you can take off the business? So if you look at, say, HR, if you look at inventory, if you're looking at marketing, if you're looking at finance, are there different bits of the business that you can actually take chunks of and start to experiment and try things out on? A lot of the challenges that I think we came across from the retailers was, how and when do we start? So like it's kind of like there's still a lot of fear out there of what do I do and when should I start? And the big challenge I think that a lot of retailers specifically are going to suffer from is, the bigger global retailers have a huge amount of data and have already started a lot of this process already. So they're already ahead of the curve in terms of the learning of their models. So their models are learning internally already, maybe for the last 12 months, how their business is operating and where they can make impacts from the data using the AI systems. A lot of the businesses that are sitting there waiting, saying, well, when should we do this or how should we go about it, are starting to fall further and further behind. I give the analogy of it's like watching a cruise ship going out of the bay, and you're kind of saying, should we hop on? And you're kind of sitting watching it, and it gets further and further away. And the challenge with AI is it's exponential growth and exponential learning. So the more data and learning that the model has, the quicker that those businesses get ahead of your business if they're your competitors, and the more challenging it's going to be for your business to catch up. So we had said it on the day, the when is now. The how is like, talk to somebody about it, like talk to an expert in the field, talk to somebody that can take a little bit of chunk of your business and say, okay, let's try this experiment with this piece of the business to begin with and see where it goes. Because you have to start somewhere.
And the fear for Irish retailers is you're no longer only competing with the similar business down the road from you. In a digital world, you're competing with the likes of all the large multinational companies who are, as you say, ahead of the curve when it comes to this. So what we're going to do now is throw up our final survey, our final poll. So in your business, where would you most like to see an early win from AI? And I'll just read out some of the options there. There's reducing theft and fraud, enhancing customer experience, increasing staff productivity, minimizing unsold stock with smarter forecasting, or expanding customer reach through marketing. So as I said, we'll go through the responses in a bit. What I want to ask you now is about smaller retail, more specific to smaller retail, because presumably smaller businesses have the same issues that the larger businesses on the day of our events had, but they don't have the same resources to deal with them. So, John, what's your advice for a smaller retailer?
Well, again, they need and it is a challenge, because AI, especially machine learning and generative AI, are data hungry. And some people feel that I don't have enough data, or like going to your question earlier, where do I start? we've started an AI accelerator for small businesses in Ireland. That's a simple 5-week, 5-step process where they come in, understand what are the scary terms, what does it actually mean, what does Gen AI mean, what's deep learning, machine learning, how does it apply to my business, and then they share some of their data. We actually audit it to say, based on your data and based on what we've seen here, we'll start developing a strategy with them. And then you have the legal side of it, which is really important, for businesses to understand. There is now an EU AI Act. It's based on a risk profile of whatever AI you're deploying in your business. How do you put in that governance and that structure from the start to make sure you're compliant? And then we look at actual use cases, successful use cases in your space, and how do they apply possibly to your business? And then the art of possible. At the end of that 5-week, 5-workshop period, they walk out with an AI strategy for them, bespoke to their business, to say, here's what we believe the art of possible is for your business. Because for some, it is that daunting thing, where do I start, And typically we say, if you had access to 100 or 1,000 interns in the morning, what tasks would you put them at in your business? And that's where you should that's where your mindset should be at, because you wouldn't put them at any customer activity. You'd put them at a work, and you put them at functions that are repetitive, that are boring, that should be automated, and internally start crowdsourcing the development of that. So people begin to understand it, they begin to realize, okay, this is where we can benefit in our business, and grow it out from there. And then they begin to trust it and see the benefits that it can deliver.
Even when you talk about things like legal concerns, how would a small retailer start that process without a bit of support?
Yes, and it's quite a simple framework, but you should follow it. You should know and be aware about it from the very, very start to make sure that you are compliant, because that's a really important part. Because it's here now. The EU Act is live. The EU AI Act is a live piece of.
What would your advice be, Fergal?
Well, I think two areas where maybe the smaller retail has an advantage over the larger global behemoths is agility. So, they're small, so they can pivot and they can move fast. So if they see kind of trends or things happening, they can maybe move with those trends quicker than a larger organization can. Definitely. So they have that speed and agility piece that a smaller business can have. The other thing that AI models really need is quality data. So it's not just the vastness and the big data sets, but it's also that the data is good quality. Okay. And you can take it as an advantage that the smaller businesses, because they have smaller data, will be able to clean it quicker and easier. Okay. So because you have smaller data sets.
Because as John said, that is a concern, that they don't have the right data available to start.
Exactly. So you can start by making sure that the data you're inputting into your AI models in the first place is good quality, and that's something that a large global organization, again with multiple silos of data, will struggle with. So it's a piece where a smaller business can get ahead. But the other thing that they can do, and it's a method we use in our product, and I think you have a product as well that uses this as well. But you can augment your internal data with external data. So our system is obviously based on advertising, so we can take the customer data that the client has, but we augment that then with, say, consumer data from the Irish market or the UK market, depending on where they're advertising. We can augment that with media data from the likes of Nielsen and Kantar from those markets that they're dealing in as well. So it'll augment that data upwards. And again, like with your Main Street Insights product as well, that can give them additional kind of insights into their consumer behavior, when they're spending, how much they're spending, the demographics, etc. So they can use these external products, databases, insights to actually augment the insights that they have internally in the business as well.
Okay. Where we're going to go to now is the future of AI. So we're going to try and, I suppose, ask the question of this webinar: will AI be good for Irish retail? So when we started, at the start of this webinar, we talked about solutions that are currently being used by Irish retailers. So I'll go to you first, John. What could you conceive to be a solution available to all Irish retailers in, let's say, 5 years?
Well, it's hard to look out 5 years in this space because things are moving so quickly. But what I would say is that what we feel is happening in the space, or if you look at what's actually happening in the AI world, there's some very large players in the generative space, but disruption is already coming for the likes of ChatGPT. The largest player in this space has yet to emerge. They're going to start to get industry-specific models, smaller, like what we touched on earlier, because the approaches and these efficiencies, especially the energy efficiency, because the energy to run these models, let alone the compute cost to run them, is enormous. So you're going to have smaller, more industry, retail-specific models that individual retailers, small and medium, can lean into. So that will unlock much deeper insights and predictions in, because what does anybody want? You know what I mean? I want some clarity about what's going to happen 6 months out in my business. I'd like to have some, and the beauty about using machine learning or AI is that in 3 months, if I make a prediction, or the model makes a prediction 3 months out, 6 months out, in 3 months, if it's wrong, then you're like, okay, this is not working. It's very quickly you're able to tune it and get it right because it's data driven. But that disruption is coming at a level for all industry. I think you'll see marketing specific, small language models, not large ones, smaller ones that are cheaper to run, more efficient, as powerful, but ones that will be dedicated to the retail industry. That as a retailer, going to Fergal's point, if you don't have enough data yourself, you'll be able to plug in to this capability to see, okay, how am I actually benchmarking myself against others in a similar space? But you have to be ready. If you don't start taking the steps now, because this will be commoditized. If your data is not ready, if you haven't done the work so you can take advantage of this, then you're definitely going to miss out.
Okay, interesting. One thing I just want to say to the viewers is that we're coming to the end of this webinar, so if you have any questions, if any come to mind, we will have a few minutes to pick the brains of these two guys, so feel free to throw them into the chat. But Fergal, now I want to ask you, what does the future of AI look like for Irish retailers?
Yeah, just a few quotes on prediction. The future is the hardest thing to predict, obviously, and the best way to predict the future is to create it. So that's obviously what myself and John's companies are doing. We're trying to create this future of AI for retailers and businesses in general with the products we have. I think what the future, in my opinion, the way the future will go is, from an AI perspective, is that AI becomes like the internet. It's ubiquitous. It's across everything. We won't say, oh, isn't that cool AI? We'll just say that's a cool product. Like, I'll give you the example, driving up here today from Galway, I was on Google Maps, there was a couple of crashes on the way in. Google Maps said to me, I've got a route that'll get you there 11 minutes faster, do you want to take it? And I click, yes, I do. I don't think, oh, isn't that cool AI? I just think that's cool that the product has done that. And I think that's the way I can see AI going. It becomes a utility. It becomes just, we're going to take it for granted. It's your broadband, it's your, it'll give you an advantage. For sure it'll give you an advantage if you're using it in your business, but it should become ubiquitous across all products and services. I would see in the future is probably the way it will move. Like, we'll go away from this bit of all the wow stuff that's coming out. Like, we've seen the robots, Elon's robots, and we've saw
these human powered robots. You may or may not have had at that live show, albeit they're very interesting. I mean, that Optimus, like, if you think about having robots to do roles and tasks in retail stores that people don't like doing, maybe like late night stocking of shelves. I did it when I was in university. Those types of roles could be very easily filled by a robot, but whether that's there yet, I don't know. It might be an overreach on the promise of that, I think.
I think specifically as well, Connor, just on that, back to kind of the retailers, what they can expect, and why they should be embracing it, I suppose, as well for the future. Like, if you can give your customer a more joined up customer experience, so if AI, through AI models and AI products in your business, can give your customer a better experience, it's surely better for your business. We're all about, like, retailers and all businesses are all about their customer, and they want to serve their customer as best they can. If you give your customer a better experience through using AI as a solution to a problem that you have within your business, then surely it's a good thing for the business. The other thing is around, marketing efficiency, marketing effectiveness. Can you get that more effective and a better return on your marketing? So reducing down the return on that, or increasing the return, reducing the costs, is huge. Again, a hugely big thing. The other thing I'd say is like things like inventory and the boring stuff. We were talking about this boring stuff earlier on. Like, it's the boring things that AI should come in and fix. Like, the stuff that people don't want to be doing, to John's point, is where AI can really help in the future.
I'll ask one last question, but considering time, maybe respond in bullet points. Or what do humans do better than AI?
I would have said, like, the the thing when AI was coming around, initially everybody said, oh, it's going to take all the kind of the task-driven stuff away. And it does that really, really well. But people said, you know, it'll never take away human creativity and all that. But when we look at all the generative AI tools that have come out, it's a lot around creativity. It's all around creating content, creating visuals. And so therefore you think, okay, is it creativity at all? I think where the AI struggles at the moment is around strategy. So it doesn't have an understanding of like business strategy. So like if you ask an AI, if you upload your business information to an AI and say, give me a strategy on my business, it'll give you like a kind of a book answer, an academic answer to it, but it doesn't know your business the way you know your business. And so therefore you'll never get that kind of deep insights into the business from a strategic level that a human would have. Yes. So I think the two working together is probably, you know, the ideal. You want like the co-pilot model where you're getting the data from the AI, you may be getting some recommendations from the AI, but at the end of the day, there's a team of humans that are actually making the strategic decisions around the business.
Very interesting stuff. Okay, so before we go into that Q&A, we're going to take a look at the survey results. Okay, so very interesting. So which of the following AI tools have you used? So 3 of the tools there were not used at all. And the last 2, ChatGPT is obviously used by most, and the customer service bots used by a few as well. What do you make of those results?
Probably in line with what I would have expected. You know, people are, and I think businesses are starting to play with the likes of generative AI. And going to your last point, you know, what humans are better at. You know, one thing we have found is that we're much better at opinions and creating like an opinion at work. You cannot ask an AI for its opinion. It just won't give you an opinion. So you need people with soft skills. It's great at reaching, it's great at maybe especially querying information is really powerful that most people would not be familiar with. Summarizing results, it's fantastic at that. If you have large corpuses of data or customer data, it's amazing at summarizing that into bullet points that you asked us to look at earlier. It's very, very good at that. But that's most people's starting point is to start playing with it and seeing where they can go with it. So that's probably in line with what I would have expected, Fergal. I don't know what.
Yeah, I just add into that, Connor, that maybe that's a bit scary. Because if that's people uploading commercially sensitive information to ChatGPT or an OpenAI model, that's 77% of businesses, that's very risky. So it depends on what information they're sharing with ChatGPT, what type of work they're doing. So if it's just, you know, create me a piece of content for this, I'm this type of business, or if it's here's all my financials, tell me like what you think about this, that's worrying. Okay. So I think John mentioned early on about the closed model. It's very, very important that if you're sharing information with an AI, that it's your own closed model data that you're using, not something that you're just putting up into the open internet.
Okay, be wary of what you and your staff are sharing, okay. We'll go on to the next one then. So which of the following data challenges do you most identify with? So there are 2 big, forgive me, it's hard to see here, but you can see the 2 there.
It's in silos, I think.
My data is in silos, yeah.
And it's difficult to have enough time then to analyse the data.
You've better eyesight tonight.
Yeah, well, I've glasses. That's why I have glasses.
This one I think is the big one there, is I'm unsure how to use the data I have.
Yeah.
How do you make it up?
That is very reflective in what I see, is that what do I have, how do I use it, how is it going to unlock some insight into my business? You know, and that's the same challenge whether you're a small, medium or large business. And it goes back to, you need a plan, you need a strategy, you need to pick, and I know I might be going back to this again, but internally crowdsource it. Pick something in your business that is not touching your customers first. Look at inventory, look at warehousing, distribution. Where can I add an incremental value that will show me by results, because it's data, what has this done to drive an efficiency? How have I saved time so that some of my team can focus on being better with our customers, whether that's online or in, you know, a physical store?
What are your thoughts, Fergal?
It's ask for help. You know,
Yeah.
if you're unsure what to do with all the data you have in your organization, it's reach out to somebody to ask them to help. Whether that's bring in a consultant, bring in a company, you know, talk to people maybe that have gone down this road before you. You know, maybe someone that you know in your network or your organization. Like the retailers in Ireland are really good at coming together in groups. So maybe someone within that group already has tried some of these AI experimentation tools.
Well, that was a really interesting thing we learned from the events. Like the retailers, there was so many different sections of retailers, different types of retailers, fashion, hardware, so on. But they all had the same problems. They all had the same challenges with managing and using data.
For sure.
Okay, we'll go on to our last one then. Is in your business, where would you most like to see an early win from AI? And John, I might ask you to help me again.
I think the big one there is expanding customer reach through marketing.
Yep.
Fergal, you'll be happy about that. And then minimizing unused stock, which is the more, as I go back to that's where the more nuts and bolts side of a business. We're looking at how you're going to drive efficiencies in your inventory, in your distribution, in your stock management, in your ordering, your purchasing. How can I streamline that? How can we automate that workflow? AI loves that, loves numbers, loves time series data. You know, there's a start, there's a finish, there's, you know, some, you know, bits of movement in the middle. AI loves that, especially machine learning, loves that.
Okay. Brilliant. Right. Well, we might wrap up the survey responses then and go to the Q&A to see what questions our audience asked. Okay, the first one. Are the products cost prohibitive for smaller retailers? Good question. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, do.
Saying it to you, yeah. If you don't mind, because I've come from SatStock this morning, and one of the things that they were talking about at that was actually the rapid reduction in costs in the AI tools. So the OpenAI ChatGPT model has reduced by 95% over the last 18 months. So as the models get smarter and they can process more information, the testing becomes less expensive because they've already tested and they're just reiterating. So the costs go down, and because the likes of Llama from Meta, they have a free model, they have an open source model. So if you've got an open source model that's as good as a paid model, the paid model can't really charge a huge amount more. So the costs are reducing all the time as the models get bigger and bigger. So from a cost perspective, it's actually only going to get cheaper and cheaper to actually use these models.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Sorry, John.
Yeah, and the beauty is, look at like trust in AI. Who am I going to use to help me on this journey? You need to look at, nobody can lift the hood and look in and say, oh, that's what it's doing. Nobody, like there's a tiny minority of people that'll understand how AI models work. It's really, what have you done for similar companies in my space? And then tell me about that use case. What percentages, how have you increased productivity? How have you, increased sales? How have you cut costs? In reality, show me the data. Then you've got something as a starting point, I think.
As you said, it's really easy to know if it's effective, especially when you're looking at the kind of the back end side of your business.
It's the data. You can
data,
see,
yeah.
I know where I establish a baseline. This is where we are now. Where are we in 3 months' time and 6 months' time? And very quickly you can see that return on investment. Typically, you should get it within 12 to 18 months. You should have an ROI on your investment in AI, and then the rest is upside.
That's the thing, sorry, Connor, to just add to that, it's a business case for AI. So like if you can see that by implementing something, let's say in our instance it'd be in the advertising or marketing space, and that brings you 120 million in new business by implementing this new system, then it's a no-brainer. So if you can see a business case of return on investment like that by implementing something in parts of your business, then it should just make commercial sense to the business to implement it.
Okay, we'll go on to another question. What is the most common AI used in retail at the moment in Ireland? It's interesting.
Well, you can see from some of the questions answered earlier, they seem to be using generative AI, and it's a combination of both. We would see, generative AI, but in a closed instance, trained on your data, not trained on the wider world, to engage with your team, number one, because people need to, there's a mindset change here. Eventually AI has to fit into the systems that exist right now. In 5 years' time, AI will be the system. Because once it learns, then all of these become redundant. You don't have to log into a system anymore. It already has you logged in. It knows it's you. You single sign on in the morning, and you can just start talking directly to your data. So I think it will be a combination of the ability of generative and the ChatGPT large language model functionality combined with machine learning predictive capability on your actual data.
Okay.
There's probably, just to add to that, there's probably some AI tools that they don't even realize they're using. You know, there's some tools probably in their business, maybe that's ERP or inventory stock management or marketing or whatever, that's using AI underneath the hood and they're not aware of. But obviously from the poll, there's people dipping into ChatGPT a lot. But there's for sure other tools that are being used in businesses, but maybe people aren't aware of the flashy AI that's going on underneath the hood.
Good. Okay, let's see if we have any more. For a smaller retailer with limited resources, what's a low-cost AI tool or strategy they can start implementing to see immediate value? Who wants to take that?
Well, I'll be selfish and say you should sign up to our AI accelerator. You know, it's 5 weeks. You'll answer all of those questions within 5 weeks with a strategy tailored to your business about where I should take my first steps, how I should take them, and how do I stay compliant. That would be my advice, but that's selfish advice, I would say. But.
And I won't do the same, but obviously it's by media. If they want to implement that or bring in some of Main Street Insights into their business. You know, there's lots of stuff out there that they can use to help.
Yeah, well, Main Street Insights uses machine learning and it is a free product available to all ABMS customers. I think we have another question. As you mentioned, many small retailers struggle with data sitting in silos. What's a practical first step they can take to unify and make better use of their data? John,
you need to get an expert in to do it. I would suggest because the reality is they're sitting in different systems. It is siloed. Not many people would have the all this capability it's all open sourced. It's all out there. But to join the dots and figure out how to do it, to create a knowledge graph, that's not going to cost you thousands a month. Because if you don't know what you're doing regarding AI, if you're bringing any type of machine learning capability or especially generative AI capability into your business, you can quickly run into the 5s, 10s of thousands a month because they're very hungry. You need to be able to do this efficiently and understand those first steps. Then once you're informed, you can make your own decisions to say, actually, I'm going to go ahead with this company, this product, this solution, once you actually understand what you're doing. I hope that answers that question, but you really need to do it from the start. You need to have a clear plan and a strategy.
Okay. Do we have time for another? Yeah, okay. How do you see AI balancing between enhancing customer experience and protecting consumer data privacy, especially in Irish retail? Fergal, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's really important that the retailers are bringing the data in a GDPR compliant way in the first place. You know, that people are getting sign off, that people are allowing their data to be used by the systems. Because if you don't do that in the first place, then it basically negates all the work. Actually, again, from the event this morning, the product VP of product for HubSpot was talking, and that's one of the restrictions. So the restrictions on marketing for all businesses, but retailers specifically, is not about the technology. The technology is there to do that joined up customer experience piece. The challenge is going to be the data compliance piece. Yeah. It's making sure that you've got customer consent to actually reach out to them with messaging, that you've got customer consent to call them, to send them emails. So all of that, if you don't have that piece, then so you've your data all structured beautifully, you've got the tools in place to actually execute on it, but you haven't got sign off on data compliance. So you can't do anything with the data in essence. Okay. So it's important that, again, from back to all of our points on the strategic element of it, you have to look at this as a strategic solution to a problem that you have within the business. And if you're trying to unify a customer experience, then you need to have your data in the right order, you need to have the quality of the data correct, you need to have the tools to actually execute the campaigns to do it properly, but you also have to have the customer agreement that they've bought in and signed off on the delivery of those messages to them. Okay,
it's really important. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for when it comes to questions. Guys, thanks so much for that. This is a topic I find really, really interesting, and I think when it comes to any new piece of technology like AI, there's always going to be fears and concerns, but the way you guys talk about data and AI with such enthusiasm kind of, is very comforting, and I hope our viewers feel the same. So to our viewers, thank you very much for your time and attention today, and hopefully we'll see you on future webinars. All the best.